It's time for the Charlotte FC podcast.
Blocked, Duzbak's gonna get it back. Westwood, rather Vargas, the touch, the finish!
Gone!
The Alba, whipped in, good ball!
Oh!
Christian Kalina, a save to save the season!
Crowd belongs to Charlotte! And Charlotte FC, if the results hold, have clinched its first playoff berth in club history!
Welcome, bienvenidos, cheers, bienvenuti. Hey, it's another Charlotte FC podcast. I'm your host, Nick Finelli, and today I'm so excited that you all get to listen to what Adam Parr does. He is the head of performance at Charlotte FC, and I talked to him during the off-season to talk about what he's doing to help the players and how they need to be in the shape that they need to be in, and what his job entails and how he communicates that, and how it's going with the new coach. So take a listen in. You're going to love it. Enjoy Adam Parr, head of performance, Charlotte FC. Do me a favor, just introduce yourself and what your current role is at Charlotte FC.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here. So my name is Adam Parr, and I'm the head of performance at Charlotte FC. And I've been here since the beginning. Came on initially as like a performance specialist where I was a dual role of kind of the head strength coach and sports scientist. And then obviously with certain changes and stuff, was elevated up to head of performance and was that role all of last year and then going into this season as well.
Cool. So we've been throwing around that head of performance, and it seems kind of trendy, although it's been used for a while. What is, when we talk about head of performance, like what are you really doing?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think it obviously changes club to club and even sport to sport, depending on what kind of staff you have. But for me personally, basically the easiest way to say it is I'm responsible for overseeing, designing, and kind of managing the physical development programming at Charlotte FC. So obviously the majority of my role focuses on the first team, but I also am overseeing those below at Next Pro and the academy as well. And so that's kind of everything in a nutshell. But, you know, obviously there's certain tasks, daily, weekly, monthly, everything is a little bit different, but I kind of, that's the nuts and bolts of it.
And so when you say overseeing the whole performance and the physical aspects, you're designing what strength and conditioning things they need. What
Correct.
else?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically that it's an all encompassing term, right? You can look at it as everything that the guys need from a physical standpoint, as far as like, before training, if they're working on certain pre-training things, like, we call it prehab, mobility type of things like that, injury prevention, running mechanics, change of direction mechanics, acceleration, deceleration, a lot of that stuff. And then you can look into, like, obviously some people may see me, on the field, obviously at matches. So being responsible for designing and implementing all of the warm-ups every day for training, but also for match day. And then how do those warm-ups tie into what we're doing on field for the day? If it's a smaller space day, making sure that we are getting in the acceleration, deceleration, change of direction stuff to get them prepped for that. If it's a bigger day, making sure that we're getting, high-speed running, sprinting, things like that as part of the warm-up or as part of the pre-training activities. Also designing and kind of overseeing the speed development program throughout the course of the season, but obviously at every level. And then and conditioning programs, not just in preseason, but throughout the season. We'll continue doing certain conditioning things, and also taking a look at all of the gym programming, kind of coming up with the overall philosophy and how it's going to be. And then obviously Pete Gorka works with us, and he's our strength coach, and so he'll take the real nitty-gritty part of the strength program in the gym and really program that out. But it comes from an overall kind of annual plan that I kind of give to him and say, here's how we're going to do it, how we're going to tie all these things together. And then along with that, I'll assist our athletic trainers with end stage rehab on the field. So, whether it's designing the drills, running the sessions, or helping them, or even just helping them determine what drills they need so the players can get whatever specific metrics they need to get that day. If they need to get a certain amount of high-speed running or sprinting, or again, accelerations, decelerations, things like that. Like, how do we do that, or how do we do things at a certain intensity? So looking at the data. And so the past 2 seasons, I've also really done, looked into a lot of the sports science stuff, obviously. So the GPS data every single day, utilizing that to help program each session for the day with the coaches, and John McGregor, who's my supervisor, kind of being in with the coaches, and they're the ones who decide it. But what are we looking at from a loading standpoint? And then during training, looking at it live to see what guys are getting, so that if we need to top them off, as we say, so that they hit specific daily targets, looking at all that, reporting it to the coaches, the key stakeholders, et cetera, looking at things from a weekly standpoint, monthly, a 6-week cycle, and then kind of designing the whole overall plan. And really, it's how does all of that fit together? Because you can do one thing here and then one thing here, but if they don't mesh, then there's no reason to really do either one, because they're going to conflict. So it's really kind of taking all of those different layers of physical development, and then how do we make sure that each one works together in a kind of a sequential order, and that can be day to day, week to week, things like that. And then similarly, like I said, kind of managing our performance coaches at Next Pro and the academy, as far as making sure that they're doing things as similarly to the first team, with the different logistics that they have to face, and trying to make sure that we kind of have a one club mentality, where we're all trying to do the same thing, so that as players move up and staff potentially move up, you're not having to learn different things. It's a very seamless transition.
That's pretty cool. You mentioned a lot of different things in there that you do. One of them that caught my eye was the speed performance. And can you kind of walk us through what your mindset is when you're thinking like, okay, of course, everybody can always increase their speed at certain things. And I'm sure it's like footwork, but it's also maybe bursts, or maybe it's speed, laterally or something like that. How do you design and come up with something like this to really help each individual player? Because they have strengths and weaknesses in areas.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different ways to answer your question. So the first thing is taking each individual player and kind of what we would term like a needs analysis. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And then what also do they need to improve on, based on what our coaching staff is saying, on field, but also based on what the player is saying, because they know their body better than any of us, right? So sitting down with them, getting a needs analysis from kind of all of these different parts and putting them together in a whole. And then, okay, if we do need to focus on, change of direction ability, things like that, then that can be something that we drip in for that player over the course of the week when they're kind of pre-training activities. So not only are they doing mobility and things like that, but they're doing certain activation exercises. They're doing stuff on our turf, that can be change of direction mechanics. It can be resisted, things like that. And so if we're doing that over the course of the week after week after week, month after month, then, we're progressing them. And so then it's on myself and then Pete Gorka, and then additional staff as well, to kind of come up with that plan, and how do we progress that, and then how do we program that and put it into their daily, weekly, programming. And so that's one way to do it. And then the other way is also kind of team wide, and that's more in the sense of everybody does similar things. You have your own individual stuff you need to work on based on your needs analysis, or injury prevention, specifically for guys who have previous injury history in certain areas. But then we can also have team-wide stuff that they need to do on certain days, again, that fits with what the goal of the session is for that day. So, so if, excuse me, if the session is a bigger session that day, big spaces, so we're, the physical target is going to be more high-speed running and sprinting and things like that, right? So we can have, individual players can be doing their individual programming that they have to address their needs and to address their injury prevention, injury history, etc. But also team-wide, they can be doing certain things that are going to help them in their sprint mechanics, their acceleration mechanics, things like that, as part of their pre-training, so that once they go out on the pitch, they've already kind of activated a lot of those muscles and everything, and they've kind of got that micro dosing in, that again, we're working on that week after week after week, month after month, and kind of programming that out to progress. And then, so you don't have to necessarily do that as part of the warm up, you can get them right into the actual change of direction or the actual high speed running in the example I gave. So it's kind of a combination of both. But we program that out, like I said, like almost the entire season. So we'll break things into blocks, kind of 6-week blocks, and we'll have, certain focus for change of direction, for high speed running, for sprint mechanics for that 6 weeks, and kind of progress that. And then we kind of progress it to the next evolution of whatever we were doing there team wide, and then we'll kind of do that on an individual basis as well to address any needs. So we really try and hit it from all angles to make sure the guys are physically developing, but also we're not really overloading them, like doing a ton of stuff on one day. It's kind of dripping it in throughout the week based on what the session plan and the demands are for that session.
So it sounds like, to me, when I hear that, sounds like body performance needs is really no different than what we're doing or what we should be doing in our schools, is where you have, somebody's kind of facilitating, guiding. They're giving certain people more practice with this. They might get some pre-practice. Everybody's kind of getting moved together on certain things that everybody has to do, but you're still working on all these different things over time, and you have a plan.
Yep.
Does that kind of sum it up?
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect analogy for it. Like I said, we're coming into starting this new season, and we've already been working on basically our entire annual plan for 2024. So obviously the schedule came out recently, so able to plug that all in, and then kind of look at what are we looking at from home games, away games, international breaks, all stuff. And we have a whole kind of database that we plug everything in and say, okay, here's each 6-week block, so to speak. And what are we focusing on from, acceleration? What are we focusing on from deceleration? What are we focusing on from high speed running or sprint mechanics? But then also in the gym, like what's our focus, because we have certain things, and then making sure that everything kind of marries up. And then also what are we doing from our on field, looking at our GPS metrics and things like that, so that we're progressing the guys. And then also what are we doing conditioning wise? And we literally have kind of a rough guideline for the entire season, and then we'll go in and plan each kind of 6-week cycle in much more minute details, as it gets closer and closer, so that we're really making sure that we're covering all our bases and not leaving any gaps, so to speak, for the team, but also for each individual.
So I want to get into probably what changes when you have new managers and new kind of thoughts. So I want to get your thoughts on what's happened already with the manager, Dean Smith. But when talking about a drill, just so other people know, like let's say there's, we'll bring speed back up again. What specific things would I see somebody doing, knowing that, hey, they're working on acceleration or something like that? What kind of things would they be doing?
So, I think it's a good question. If you want a really simple way to break it down, acceleration versus like max speed is basically like anything that you see where the guys are having to, accelerate or run fast 20 meters and less is going to be working on acceleration. Anything larger than that is really more working on, max speed, top end speed, things like that. So it's a really simple way to break it down, because, you can't get to max speed within 20 meters. It's almost, impossible. Maybe Usain Bolt, who knows? But so when we're working on smaller space stuff, like, 10 meters, 5 meters, 15, 20, whatever, that's all acceleration work, and it's different phases of acceleration. And also you can be working on acceleration from different stances, right? So you can be facing one way and have to turn sideways to accelerate, or turn, push off one side and change direction, accelerate the other way. But it's all smaller spaces, whereas speed, like max speed, as you want to call it, or absolute speed, as we like to term it, is anything that's going to be like 20 meters and farther. So if you see certain drills where the guys are having to run, really far, that's obviously we're working on max speed. And then the shorter ones are acceleration. And a lot of times you'll see shorter ones that we're working on a combination of both acceleration and deceleration, because that's often something that people don't realize is, it's a lot easier on the body to accelerate fast, to go quickly, but it's very difficult mechanically on the body to stop very quickly, right? And a lot of injuries happen actually when in that deceleration phase. And so we need to make sure that we're not just having them accelerate and then they just kind of continue on and come to a slow stop, but we'll have specific things where we're having them stop on a dime, or stop and then push off and accelerate the other way, and trying to make it as sport specific as possible, but teaching them the mechanics of not only when you accelerate, this is how you need to do it and from this position, but also when you decelerate, these are the positions you need to get into so that you're doing it in a safe manner. You're teaching the body how to do it so that in the game, when it's chaotic and you're not thinking about, I need to do this to stop slow, quickly and push off, you just automatically do it because of the muscle memory. And so I think that's a key thing, is we're often working on both of those things at the same time, but people don't necessarily realize that, and could even be change of direction as well.
Right. So all this is being done on this, the back end, kind of, we're not seeing this, but we do see stuff, or the fans do see things during pre-match training and even post-match. There's, performance things being done then too. Can you talk about what a fan might see to know, like, hey, they're working on this specific part pre-match, and then at the end of the match, you see a lot of players sprinting and doing things, and y'all are measuring stuff. Can you talk about both of those too?
Yeah, absolutely. Pre-match it's pretty simple. It's just, it's a warm-up, but there is a structure to the warm-up, and it follows anybody who, might have any experience or have taken classes in strength conditioning or, kinesiology, exercise science, might know general, but it's called the ramp-up protocol. But it's basically raising, the blood pressure, the temperature, activating the muscles, doing some mobility, and then what we call potentiation. So it really, you'll see, the starters in one area, and then kind of the non-starters in another area, and doing similar things, but obviously the starters are doing it at a much more intense rate because they need to ramp up and get into the game. So we'll do certain things like movement skills and we call dynamic stretches. So it stretches within movement instead of how you would term a static stretches, where you're just standing, bending over, reaching for something. So stretching within movement to open them up. And work on their mobility, and then moving, they'll be shuffling sideways, forward, backwards, all different things. And this is all just to kind of, again, raise their temperature of the muscle, activate certain muscles, and then to, kind of open up their mobility at the hips, ankles, knees, et cetera. And that's all just kind of in that initial phase where they're just moving around and kind of going back and forth. And then the next phase is kind of getting a little bit more sport specific. So we start doing a little bit, I'll term it fast feet, but that's not really a scientific term. It's just more to get them moving a little bit quicker, and then with a little quick burst out of it, acceleration with a deceleration. And so again, we're getting a little bit more sport specific, but they're still not going at a super intense rate. And then the next phase will be true change of direction, acceleration, deceleration, where they're going back and forth and then accelerate, or forward and back and accelerate really hard. So again, it's getting progressively more and more intense as the warm-up is going along, and then we'll finish it with them opening up and getting some high-speed running into some sprinting, so that their posterior chain or their hamstrings, etc., they've gotten that in before the match, because you don't want the first time that they go to run fast be the first minute of the match. You want them to have done it beforehand, so that again all those muscles are activated and whatnot. And so that's
right. That's where injuries happen, right?
Exactly. So that's kind of the basis of the pre-match. And that's all happening in 7 minutes, right? So it's very quick, but it has a very structured way behind it. And then obviously they get into all the footballing stuff with the technical coaches. And then I'll take the non-starters, same thing. Like during a game, you'll see obviously over in the corner, I'm warming up the non-starters, and I take them through the same protocols, right? It's just a little bit more drawn out, because they don't need to do it in 7 minutes and go in, and unless I've been told hey, they're going in at this minute, so we need to make sure that they're ready to go. But it'll just be a little bit more drawn out, but they'll go through the same progressions that the starters will have gone through, because it's ticking all those boxes. And they might even do a little bit of extra stuff, because we have much longer in the second half, obviously, to do it.
Right.
So, and you don't want to have them warm up for 45 minutes, right? So they'll do a few things with a little bit of a rest, then a few things with a little bit of a rest, so that, they're not super tired going into the game. And then after the match, when fans see everybody, a lot of times you'll see guys running, right? So basically what we're doing there, excuse me, is we're trying to get their high-speed running and sprinting in that they need because they didn't get into the game, or they only got in for a certain amount. So anybody who kind of plays less than 30 minutes is going to need to be topped off. And so, like I said earlier, we're looking at all the GPS metrics, daily, but also weekly. So we have weekly loads that we want for every single player, right? Based on it's all based on their match loads, which we get when they play. And so we have certain ratios that we want for their total distance for the week, for their high speed running for the week, for their sprint distance, etc. And so going into the match, obviously knowing the non-starters, I'll have a list of everybody and what they need to get to keep them within a certain range that we want, to make sure that they're not, going to be overtrained, obviously, if they've had a really crazy week, but they're not going to, more importantly, be detrained, because it's really easy for the players who don't start regularly to slowly, detrain over the course of the season.
Yeah.
And then when they are called upon in a match, they can't withstand the demands, whether it's conditioning wise or they can't withstand the demands and potentially get injured. So we want to tick them off and really in our, what we call our intensive metrics volume wise. So it's our high speed running, our sprinting, those are the ones generally where a lot of people will get injured. So if we can keep those in a certain range every single week, then we know from research and experience that decreases the likelihood of their injuries, especially hamstring, which is the number one injury for soccer players. So that's why we're doing the running afterwards, is we'll have them do, their conditioning, but it's to get a certain amount of high speed running. And then we'll have them do some sprints as well. And you'll see them in kind of different, almost gates, there's like 4 different groups basically. And that's based on their fitness level and their conditioning and whatnot. And so they're doing the same thing, but they may have to go different distances because some guys are, much faster than other guys or more fit or whatever.
Right.
So to get the same adaptation, they need to be doing different distances instead of just doing the same thing, because it'll be too easy for some people, but too hard for others. So that's kind of why we separate it out that way, and why you'll see the fans will see guys running after the game. It's never as a punishment. And a lot of times the guys don't want to do it, but we have that talk very early on, so they know the expectations and why, I think at the end of the day they're probably, they won't admit it at the time, but after the fact, they're probably thankful that we're doing that so that they do stay, as conditioned as possible and ready to go, and hopefully keeping their injury level down.
And it helps you all just know, what adjustments you might need to make.
Exactly.
Because you're not getting that data during their performance because they weren't out there. Now, if we see somebody on those end lines there and you're working with them getting ready, would there be a noticeable difference to a fan to be like, oh, he's definitely coming in, or not really?
No. I mean, unless somebody runs down to me and says something and, I have to go tell the player.
And then you go to somebody, and
all of a sudden he's the only one who's doing something while everyone else is just kind of chilling, doing some mobility stuff. Like, I mean that, but yeah, aside from that, no, because a lot of times I don't know, it's the coach's decisions and they'll change, and it's my job to make sure that everybody is ready to go when they, when we might be potentially making a substitution, because I don't want to be caught off guard and not have had one of the guys do something that somebody else did, assuming that someone was going to go in, and then all of a sudden the manager changes his mind, and then someone else goes in, and then they're not ready and they get injured, right? So that would reflect, very negatively on me. So I want to make sure that everyone is as ready as possible.
Right. So I guess looking at the players, because this might not be their favorite thing to do because they want to just kick the ball around, I'm sure. Are there certain type of, not incentives but do you gamify type things? Do you have them be like, okay, you're trying to beat this, and then they're working against themselves? Like, do they know that in their head? Like, oh, I got to beat this, and then they work on the next one. Okay, I got to do even better.
Yeah, I think there are certain times when we definitely do that, and I think we're going to continue to do that even more this coming year. Obviously, so we do a fitness test, and so they have their score from that, and we'll try and do that a couple times throughout the year so they can see that all of the conditioning, everything we're doing is continuing to help, and know that they're doing better. We sometimes we'll track certain runs and things like that so that they can see where they're at, but max speed is one that's really easy to kind of have them understand that everything that we're doing from a physical standpoint is translating to the field, so we have the conversation with the guys early in the year saying, we're not just having you do this to do this. Like what we're doing and why it's individualized is to help you specifically work on the things you need to work on, but also to help you continue to get better throughout the year physically. And a really easy way is when, whether it's in a match or in training, a guy sets a new max speed, and let him know afterwards, or even in the moment, because we were tracking live during training. You can see a lot of times there's certain guys, especially, where kind of light goes on like in their face, where like, oh, really? I hit that. Oh, that's all, and it's like, yeah, man, you just hit 102%. Like your new max speed is 9.5 instead of 9.42 or whatever it was. Right. And they're kind of like, oh, that's awesome. And then you can continue that conversation. Like, that's why we've been doing X amount in the gym and doing this and working on that, because like you're going to continue to get better. And so I think that's a really simple way to kind of not necessarily gamify, but have them compete against themselves. And then in the gym, we have this new technology that we added to when we moved into the new facility. At each rack, it's a camera-based system that tracks the velocity that the players are moving the bar or the weights at for certain exercises. And it's really, really cool. It's awesome. The guys are really getting into it now that they're starting to understand it. We're going to use it a lot this year, but they can go up to the iPad.
The green light thing?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So they'll hit their face on the iPad at their station, and then hit the exercise. The camera will move so that it sees them, and then they'll do the rep. And then it's basically a bar graph, and we have a certain speed zone that we want them to hit based on whatever period of the year it is, whatever specific physical quality we're testing. And if they're within that zone, it's a blue and it dings, and so they know that they hit it. If it's above that zone, then it's a red one. If it's below, it's a red one as well. So they know, if they're doing things too fast, then they need to add weight on. If they're doing things too slow, then they maybe need to take some off, because we really want to focus on that speed. But that allows them to see, when we have, week after week within a certain block, that we're trying to target certain physical qualities, that if they're going up in weight, and still able to maintain that zone, do it, like, again, they're competing against themselves. But also a lot of times, they might be competing against each other, because we'll have them sometimes lift with people in their same position group or their same developmental status or whatever it is, for the camaraderie, but also a little competition as well. So they can compete with themselves, but also with teammates, and that makes it a lot of fun, because they can see that. And then another thing that we do,
I'm sure you probably have to gauge like who is amped up by that competition, whereas who is better like for themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody is different motivation, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic. And so I think we have a good sense of who will be motivated by competing with themselves versus others. But I think another way that we're able to do the same thing, competing themselves and then also others, is we do readiness monitoring like every week, multiple days. We do certain kind of muscle tests to see where the guys are at, like basically to measure their neuromuscular fatigue, make sure that they're ready to go out on the pitch that day. And we'll do a certain test based on what we're doing that day. If it's small sided versus big sided, like if it's a big day, we're testing their hamstrings, obviously, because they're going to sprint, things like that. If it's a small day, we're going to test their groin and some other stuff, because they're going to be doing a lot of change of directions. And, we do that every week, and we have a leaderboard up on a computer screen right next to where they test, and put it up on a TV as well. And so they instantly, as soon as they test, it goes into the system and it shows what their score was, and it shows the leaderboard for everybody, and so they're seeing where they're at against the rest of the players that day. Right. But then also, they're tracking every week where they're at with that. So they're able to see if they're continually getting stronger in those areas as well. So it kind of serves the same purpose.
So can you talk a little bit now about if you've had conversations with Dean Smith? Because, I mean, you guys are separate. It's not like Dean, brought you in. It's a separate unit, and we've had a coaching change, and coaches want different things and look for different things. What have you noticed so far, and what are you going to be focusing on that you could tell me?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some conversation with Dean, and kind of just gave him a little overview on what we're doing and everything. But we ask some questions, different things, what is he looking for and this and that. And, it's pretty standard. It's not anything that's, going to blow anyone away. So it's more getting on the same page, making sure that we understand exactly what he and the rest of the coaching staff are going to expect from the players, from us, but also from specific position groups, depending on how we're going to play, things like that. Are there different expectations for wingers versus what was expected last year? Is there different expectations for center back, so that we can make sure that we're focusing on those things and helping to train those things, physically, both in the gym and on the field. So John McGregor, my boss, we'll have a lot of conversations with him revolving around all of those things, and then, kind of bring it back to us, and then we'll plan everything, and then he will kind of take it to him and say, here's everything. But in the initial conversations, he was a really great guy, and really liked everything that we were discussing, and kind of excited to work with us and see how we're doing. And obviously he's coming from, places where they have very high level performance staffs, and I've reached out and talked to a few people, and so he's going to have high expectations, which is great for us. It's a good challenge, and for us to continue to keep getting better and keep improving. And I think overall, we're just all really excited to get to work, and to get to work with him, and really make sure that we're helping complement everything that he's trying to do. So the guys are healthy, available, but also performing at an optimal level when they're on the pitch, so that we can, win games, and hopefully win trophies. And I think that's kind of the main thing for us, in initial conversations, and we'll get deeper into those in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. So Adam, where are you from originally?
I'm actually from Sacramento, California.
Okay.
Yeah. So not exactly close to home.
Well, I noticed, so for those of you all who don't know, Adam's got a history in soccer. He was an intern at Chivas when they first started, but then they went out, and I guess you did kind of stuff on your own in Los Angeles area, as far as fitness and conditioning, just privately.
Yeah. So I did my undergrad at San Diego State in kinesiology. Initially wanted to be a physical therapist, and initially wanted to kind of had a goal of I want to be a physical therapist for the U.S. men's national team at a World Cup. That was kind of even back in college.
Carson, you're close to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I played, my whole life, won a national championship my senior year of high school, and kind of went to go play in college, and not really, injuries and stuff like that, but knew I wanted to stay close to the game. So that was my major, and wanted to do that. And then once I got out of undergrad, kind of had some reflections and realized I didn't really want to do physical therapy. Worked in a lot of PT clinics, and wanted to focus more on the performance side, and was able to get through a sports medicine clinic I was working at, an internship at Chivas USA. This must have been 2010, 2011, 12, somewhere around there. I can't even remember.
A while ago, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that most of the people who listen to this probably don't even realize what Chivas USA is.
Right.
For those who don't, it was the previous iteration of LAFC. Basically, the owners bought Chivas, folded it, and then a few years later rebranded as LAFC. But anyway, I started there, and really I was the sports science intern, and I had no idea. My mentor, who was the strength conditioning coach there, his name is Jim Liston. He's at Galaxy now as the director, the senior director, player performance, innovation, etc. He's an OG. He's been in the league forever, and he's fantastic. That whole staff was with Toronto when they went on their huge run year after year after year, and he was great. And so I went in under him, and he basically said, he had a computer program that he'd been running with the guys that monitored their heart rate in training, and he didn't have time to really look at the data and make any, action out of it. So kind of said, you have 1 month to figure this out and make it actionable. And, otherwise you can basically kick rocks, because I'm not really a fan of interns. And so I did, and I wound up being there for a year and a half. I finished out that season. I was halfway through the season. And then the following year I was his assistant, and really just started with that, sports science stuff. And it was really just heart rate monitoring, and kind of utilizing that to look at player loads, and planning the week out, and drills, and all sorts of stuff. And it was the first exposure I had to anything like that. And I like numbers, and love science, obviously, and kind of had the performance background in kinesiology. And I was like, oh, it's actually really cool. And so got really into that. And then, as what happens in sport, a new owner bought Chivas USA, at the end of that year, let go of the whole staff. And so I went and worked for him for a bit at his performance center in Pasadena, doing the same thing with some college teams and some local academies. But all the while, even while I was working at Chivas USA, I had my own fitness company in Beverly Hills. And so anybody who's out there knows there's a gym on every corner, like there is a Starbucks. And so I, worked out of some what they call training gyms where you pay fees basically to utilize it, pay rent.
Yeah.
And I built up a pretty heavy clientele. A lot of former kind of PT patients that I'd worked with, but then also started building up more athletic clientele because I was working with Chivas USA, had a lot of youth athletes, and then started having some college athletes and then pro athletes come to me in their off seasons. And, and then, got in with had another business that I worked with that I sold with some gyms, working with some tennis players and stuff like that. And then kind of got into a celebrity gym, and really, it was pretty wild. I was working there, once we finished at Chivas USA and kind of that staff went to Toronto FC, they kind of said that they didn't have a full-time position for me and weren't going to ask me to move to a new country for that. So I kept doing what I was doing, and really it was crazy. I was working with celebrities and working in a gym with like some of the biggest names you possibly can imagine, walking in there. And I'm like, what am I doing here? But got to work with a lot of athletes in their off season, which was great. And then, housewives and bankers and, everyday people and youth athletes, just really, really wide gamut, retirees, things like that. And built up a pretty good business, but always kind of knew that I wanted to get back in the team setting. And so there came a point, I want to say 2017, 2018, when I decided I was going to leave that. Just wasn't super fulfilling for me. It was great, but it wasn't. I was done with LA. I was done with Beverly Hills, and was able to get a role in the USL through some connections and that I had with San Jose Earthquakes. And so I took the role there as their initially it was like an internship for 6 weeks because I was doing my master's degree through a university in Australia. And so I could utilize that to fill out the internship requirement, and then turned into a full-time position. And I was the head of strength conditioning and data analytics. And so I was a one-man band there, and the strength coach, the fitness coach, all the on-field, and the all the data, sports science, everything, like literally just myself and one athletic trainer. And it was great because I was doing my master's at that time. So I was able to kind of take a lot of stuff I was learning and then implement it the next day because it's a little bit lower level, a little bit less stress. At that time, we were the affiliate for the Earthquakes. So it was kind of like working with the next pro team. Just was able to do that and turn that after 2 years into going to Minnesota United, and went on as their assistant performance specialist. I was basically the strength coach. And that was 2020. So I moved across the country in January of 2020. And then obviously 2.5 months later, we all know what happened.
Right.
And so it was kind of like, oh man, what did I make a mistake? Because I don't really know anybody here and I can't go out and do anything, So, but the club was pretty great, and the players were really great, and we worked through it. And obviously MLS is back. Tournament, happened, and once that happened, my boss, who I'd worked for, decided to leave. And also our sports scientist had left right at the end of preseason to go to the Chicago Fire. So it turned into me being a one-man band again for Minnesota United, which was crazy because it's an MLS team. And all of a sudden I'm again doing everything, the only performance person on staff at all. But it was great because I had done that in Reno at a lower level. So I knew I could do it. And, we were really successful, made it to the semis of MLS is back. Had a good rest of that season, and then made it all the way to the Western Conference Final that season.
Right,
should have beaten the Seattle Sounders. We were up 2-0 on them with like 14 minutes left, and they somehow came back and they scored their third in the 6th minute of extra time. So that was a bit devastating, but it was a really great experience. And then the following year continued on. We brought in a big name high performance director from England in 21, and he only lasted about 4 months. And so I went back to, again, doing everything, which I was used to. And then after that is when John gave me a call at the end of 21, basically saying, I've got a position that I think would be really good for you. Are you interested? And the more and more we talked and the more and more I heard about the project, it was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. I want to go to Charlotte FC. And so that's kind of how I arrived where I am.
That's cool. So since you've done a lot of like off-season training, we see players, we've seen videos and stuff, Kalina doing his off-season training. Do they know what they're working on? Like, do you all work with those other personal trainers? Like how does that translate? Because we know a lot of times that's when we see the growth of these players is during their off seasons, like whatever they worked on, you could tell, like, oh, this is better because they worked on this.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope. Obviously, like I've been in that position and now I'm in the position I'm in. The players know what they need to work on. They meet with the coaches and everything in front office or management before they leave, kind of go over stuff. They meet with us, talk about things. We build out their programs. So we have off-season programs for everybody, both on the field and then also in the gym. And the gym ones are a little bit more individualized, especially like keepers like Lena, very different, obviously. And then the on-field stuff is a little bit individualized, but it's more kind of putting the guys in buckets based on their fitness level. So everyone's doing similar things, but again, different distances or different times or whatever based on where they're at. And so they have access to that at all times. We encourage them to follow that because we've set it up knowing that if they continue that, because it's a gradual build over the course of the offseason, that they're going to come into preseason in a good spot. Because one of the things is a lot of people don't realize, like, preseason, you don't need to be 90 minutes fit coming into day one of preseason. Like that's what preseason is for, right? But you need to be at a maintain a good level in the offseason and gradually build up so that you're prepared for the demands of preseason, so that you don't get injured, but also so that you can continue to progress in preseason and make sure that you get to the point where you are 90 minutes fit by the time that the first real match, comes around. And so the players know that they have it. We check in with them, but there's nothing against going and having their own person, because I understand it. Like I said, I've been in that position, and I understand from the players too. They're like, our season is the longest season in pro sports, right? Like for any pro sport by a long shot, right? They come in like last year, they came in, I think it was January 6th, we started preseason, and, our last match was the 25th of October. Right. So, they get 8 weeks basically of an off season. And that's if you don't go deeper into the playoffs. You have some other sports where you get 5-6 months of off season. So I understand it. We all understand if they kind of are like, I've been with you guys for 10 months. Like I need my own space mentally, et cetera. And so as long as they're letting us know that they're doing their own stuff or they're going to see someone, we'll inquire and we'll ask them to put us in contact with them. And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But we also want to give them a little bit of freedom to say, if you want to work with your own person, that's fine, but you need to make sure that you come in and you're available to do this or this or this, or at a certain body fat percentage, whatever it is, like the goals that we set out before they leave. You need to come in at this, or you need to come in ready for this. If you follow our program, we're sure you will. But if you want to do your own thing, like that's perfectly okay.
Well, they're professionals, so I mean,
exactly. That's the thing is they need to take it into their own hands, and we can't always spoon feed. We want to educate and but also allow them to have some freedom, and that's the off season a perfect time to do that. And they know if they come in and they're not ready, like they're gonna, it's not going to be a good thing for them, especially with a new manager. So I think the motivation there is pretty easy to sell this time of year. But yeah, we'll work with some people's trainers, but some of them we won't, and that's perfectly okay.
Well, I mean, technically everybody has a fresh start. It's like you're starting with a blank slate. So it's like you have to prove yourself or you have to show something, because this is the impression that this new coaching staff or, manager is going to see about you, even though everybody else is, in similar roles. I think that takes an effect for people like you, because you have to show like, hey, I know what I'm doing. This is what we're doing. This is our plan. But then the players also have to do the same thing.
Exactly.
So what do you enjoy? Like if you had to say like one thing you enjoy most about this particular job?
Wow. I mean, I'm a nerd for a lot of performance stuff and a lot of data and numbers and stuff. So I love all that. But I mean, I think I'd be lying if I didn't say, it is really cool to be on the field for matches. Growing up, having played soccer my whole life and at a decently high level before there was real academies or anything like that, so I was never going to go pro because back then only like the top 50 college players went pro. Right. But it's one of those things, like obviously being on the pitch and being part of the team, is really great. But I think also another thing that I found the more and more I've got into it is watching the players succeed is really cool, because, we get to know these guys day in and day out. They're not machines. Right. And so we get to know them on a human level and have chats and talk and this and that. And like what are you looking for? What do you want to improve on? How do you want to do this? Whether it's a contract year or, they want to become a starter or they want to be a national team, like whatever it is, what are ways that we can help with that? And then watching the players who really take ownership of that and put in the work, and then having the success on the field, or even, like I said, just the little moments of when they hit a new max speed and like the excitement in that, things like, I think though a lot of those littler moments are, as I've gotten older, are what I've really kind of grown to really appreciate, on top of getting to be part of the team and being on the pitch and really work towards, collective common goals, for the team and the club.
That's cool. Do you have like a scary moment from your career? Something that you've either made a decision to do or something that happened and you're like, how am I going to handle this?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I have like a scary moment. I think, anytime a player gets injured, like it's nature for us in performance and on the medical side with the athletic trainers to immediately say, could we have done something different? Could we have done and just start combing through data, programming, etc. And, how could I have done this different? Is this an issue? Was this a little bit too much? Was this not enough? But I think it's more about that, wanting to perfect all of the programming and the loading and everything, more so than like a one moment of like, oh my God, being scared. I think the scariest thing for me probably was initially when I left LA to go to Reno, kind of to get back in the setting again, leaving, a place I'd been for 8 or 9 years and had a really,
and you're the whole staff.
Yeah. I think, I had a really thriving, fitness business in Beverly Hills, and could have just kept doing what I was doing.
Somebody could be like, why are you leaving this?
Exactly. And it was just kind of like, no, this is what I really feel like I need to do. And then, going to the USL team, in a smaller city, obviously I knew it because I'm from Sacramento. So it's a little, it's outside of Tahoe. So it's a few hours away. I've been to Reno plenty of times, but kind of just taking that leap and saying like, I'm going to go here and I'm going to do this. And this is going to be, a step on the ladder to get to where I want to be, which is back into MLS, as a performance coach and things like that. I think that was one of those things that was kind of easy to question. But in the end, obviously I am where I am now. So it was the right decision in my opinion, but I think that's probably the only scary moment where it was just wondering if this is going to turn out the way I want it to turn out.
Yeah. Well, what about, you talked about early on maybe wanting to work for US Soccer. Are your aspirations to be like, I want to be like not only head of performance, but like of all kind of things, kind of like John's role? Would that be something you're interested in, or you're looking more at like the US Soccer level? Would you be interested in going to Premiership?
I think yes to all the above, I guess. I'm kind of open to wherever my career takes me. I think right now I'm in a very, very good place, in a very good club. And I think one of the reasons why I came here was because I'd probably never get the opportunity to do that again, where you go to a club from day one, basically, and get to be part of trying to build the foundations of a club and a culture and things like that. And if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to help, design the gym for the new facility. Like I never would have thought I would have ever had that opportunity to be a really big part of designing a gym for a professional sports organization. Right. And so John and I really worked a lot on that, which was great, and had no idea that was going to be something I was going to get to do when I came here, but I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't. Or, I'm currently, like myself and the rest of the performance staff, all the way down to the academy, have been building out our performance kind of development framework, and curriculum of all the regressions for everything that we do in the gym at every single level to progress player after player. And then also on the pitch with all the acceleration mechanics, speed, so that we have a full on curriculum of this is what we do. This is how we do it year after year after year to develop players within our system. And wouldn't have probably had that opportunity because most places you go that have been around, they already have that established to an extent. And
so I created almost a whole system.
The main thing for me is I'm really happy where I'm at, because there's a lot of things like that going on in the club that I'm a part of or going to be a part of that I want to continue to build out and be a part of building out and help in any way Charlotte FC to become, the best and a powerhouse in MLS. And so I think right now, as head of performance, I'm really happy where I'm at. I want to continue to do all those things and continue to be the best head of performance I can possibly be. And then if at some point, I'm elevated to a director, like, great, but that can be way down the road. Like I'm not too concentrated on that. If somebody were to try and poach me to go to Europe, like, that might be interesting, but it'd also be a very, very big conversation with my wife. And so
Right.
and US Soccer is another one. I think I still would love to do that. Like my current mentor is Darcy Norman, who's the head of performance for the U.S. men's national team, and he was previously with AS Roma and with Bayern Munich and with the German national team. Like, so I have somebody really, really who has a lot of experience helping guide me in what I'm doing, and so I would love to get to that level at some point too. But like I said, I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at, because there's still a lot of work that we have to do, because we're still a startup. This is only our third season, right? So there's a lot of stuff we still need to accomplish on the back end, and then also on the pitch as well, before I feel like I'm really satisfied to go somewhere else or do anything else. And if I don't ever go anywhere else, I'd be happy to be at Charlotte FC for life.
Awesome. Well, we're in our last minute here. So there's a fan question that people are always asking, like, hey, ask this question. So is there a player that's always like wanting more of the data? Because you said you're kind of like a data geek and looking that. Is there someone that's always like asking, like, what's my data on this? Always, I guess, like almost like a gym rat. It would be almost like a data person that kind of sees the same way that you see things.
Yeah, I think there's a few.
There might be a couple.
Yeah. So, I mean, from the gym standpoint, like, it's probably easy to see, but like, Brant and George are always in the gym, and that's just, but George Marks is always in the gym, but always wants to look at everything and see, we joke and call him the performance intern, because, he loves all that stuff. Obviously, I don't know if you guys know, but he won like the NSCA, which is National Strength and Conditioning Association, like College Athlete of the Year, his last year. And so, he's really big into a lot of that stuff. And so he'll ask questions. He wants to know, he wants to be a part of the process and stuff. So like, and that's in everything on the gym field, everything. Like, so he's one that is always kind of in talking about stuff. So that's an easy one for me to kind of cherry pick. As far as like the field players, I think it kind of comes in waves. There are certain players who want to look at stuff at certain times, certain players who want to see stuff regularly. And there's certain guys who will ask, one of the couple of guys who used to always ask, especially about high speed running and sprinting each week, like on our days when you do that. And then also in the match, and want to like discuss why, or if it was too much or too little. Both Carol and Camille would ask a lot, last year. On certain times. And so we'd have discussions about that. And there's a lot of players who, Justin Miram was the same. He would want to know a lot of different things. Then he would come to me and want to ask more questions. Is, what do you think of this? Is this where I should be? Is this what, like, should I be doing more? Should I be doing less? And so I think there's different players who do stuff. Ashley will sit down and we'll talk about stuff at times. He'll talk with John a lot about what he's doing. And then different guys, like I said, at different times will want to know, but consistently we'll have conversations. We'll send out, they get a lot of the data, from the daily reports and then the match reports as well. So they get to see what they're doing, and so that they can take ownership and know if it's, what they're normally used to doing, what they should be doing, what they're not doing, et cetera. So I think we have a good culture with that, and it's only going to continue to improve because we hired on a full-time sports scientist it's a new league mandated position. So it's going to take a lot of that off of my plate. And so Matt is his name, and he'll be coming in and he's phenomenal, and we'll be able to dive real deep with a lot of the guys if they want to know. And so I think we're just going to continue to build that kind of culture and foundation of knowing data, taking ownership of it, and wanting to, utilize it in the best way possible to help the guys out.
Yeah, and I see that especially with injury, because if you're trying to battle back, you kind of want to know, because a lot of times you don't trust your body. You're like, you think you're doing something, and then your performance is not showing, but you feel good, or the opposite. You don't feel good, but somehow your performance is on par. And I think that's always hard with injuries.
Yeah. Yeah. And our athletic training staff and on the performance side, we're really good as far as kind of letting the guys know what certain targets are for the day, with their field sessions when they're doing rehab and whatnot, so that they know what they need to hit and what they're hitting and why, and what the progressive process is and all that stuff. So, they're again able to take ownership of it and make sure that they're keeping themselves accountable as well.
It's stoppage time.
Do you have a must-do personal ritual?
Yeah. So before every match, I always do a double espresso. It doesn't matter if we're home or away. If we're away, I'll find, even if it's a terrible coffee shop and it's terrible espresso, like I've had to do that a couple times. But that's just always my ritual about 2 to 2.5 hours before kickoff.
Nice. Okay. Favorite unplugged activity?
I think it's walking my dog with my wife. I think on off days or even at the end of the day, like it's kind of how one of our rituals. I'll get home. She works from home, thankfully, which allowed us to come to Charlotte. And so when she gets off of her calls, if I get home, a lot of times we'll take the dog for a long walk, in the late afternoon, early evening. And again, like catch up on the day, but also just kind of unplug and not necessarily focus on work, hopefully.
That's nice. Do you have a go-to snack while watching a match, whether you're at match day or you're just watching something on TV?
Not while I'm at match. I can't really eat while I'm at the match, like warming the guys up. But every once in a while I'll sneak something in, like if I really, really am hungry. But I think if I'm watching something on TV, I don't know, because matches a lot of times are early here. I guess sometimes like maybe pretzels. I don't a lot. Sometimes
you don't have a particular thing.
Yeah, it's not like something where it's like if like I'm a Chelsea fan and that's terrible this year. But if I don't have something that like anytime I'm going to watch a match that I just I got to get something and sit and watch it. It's kind of just if I feel hungry, I'll grab something. But if not, no big deal.
Right. Do you find starting the project or finishing one more gratifying?
Oh man, I want to say kind of both, because I think for me, starting a project is really exciting because it's something that potentially an idea that has come to me or someone else or a group of us, and we're gonna kind of see where we go with it, and that's really exciting. But I think obviously like finishing it is very satisfying because you've gone through a whole process of doing it, and now it's done, and it's kind of like, okay, that is a complete piece of work and we can move on to the next thing. So I don't know if I can pick one or the other, to be honest.
It's the journey, right?
Yeah.
In the off season, how do you recharge? Because you can't be on all the time.
Yeah, man, to be honest, like sleep. That's one of those things that I think a lot of maybe fans and even people in the company at times don't realize, like, we travel with the team and we, like, it's nice, yes, to be on a charter plane and this and that, but we'll get back at 3 or 4 in the morning and, your sleep is destroyed that day. And then you got to come back into work the next day. And, or you're in hotels and can't sleep because there's fireworks and stuff going off the night before a match, or, we're also in super early, like way before the players are there, and we stay much later than the players. So like we're working a lot, and we're, a lot of times we only got one day off a week, if that. A lot of times we don't. And so I think the off season, it can still be a lot of work, especially with this year, planning a lot of stuff, with Dean to come in. But yeah, sleep, I think is one of the best ways. And then for me also, it's music, like just listening to it again, whether it's on a walk, I have a record player, I'll put records on while I'm like cooking dinner.
Oh, nice.
Or while my wife and I are going to eat dinner. I have a guitar that I try and play every once in a while. Not very great, but it's still something to do. And so I think that's another thing. Or obviously live music.
It's totally different from your other stuff. So it kind of helps break it.
Exactly.
Is there a particular type of music that you play or listen to?
No, I mean, to be honest, I listen to everything. Like just as an example, yesterday, what was it? I was in the car. It was my wife's birthday yesterday, so we went out to dinner, and we got in the car and had a rap station on from the 90s and 2000s, and Kendrick Lamar is playing. But then earlier in the day, when I went for a walk, I was listening to Kenny Chesney, because I love Kenny Chesney country. And then I'll play, rock music, listen to alternative, Radiohead's my favorite band of all time. Like, so it's just like, it's all over the map, and Clearwater and Queen. And I mean, it's literally kind of everything. The only thing that I'm really not super, super into is like house and things like that. Like, other than like maybe working out to it.
Yeah. All right. Last question. If you were a current player on Charlotte FC, what player would you most be like? Kind of like their demeanor.
Oh man, it's hard. I don't know if I necessarily want to answer this, because I don't want to, if any of the players listen to this, I don't want to give them the satisfaction of saying that I'm not, or the guys who I don't pick.
Okay. All right. So let's switch it. Since you played, I understand totally.
Yeah.
Since you played, what position would you be out there? If you were on this team, this current team, what position would you be?
Yeah. So I was a fullback, and especially I was a wingback for a while, because of the formation we play. Like when we won the national championship, we played 3 in the back, so I was a wingback. But when I played fullback or wingback, like I was very attacking. Like I would be bombing forward, hitting crosses in, taking shots, etc. Like I used to love watching Ashley Cole play when he was with Chelsea. Obviously, not in his time before that with Arsenal. I don't pay any attention to that.
You just associate that.
I think in that sense, Nathan and Jalen, I think just positionally, that's what I played, and they both like to get forward, and obviously Nathan likes to get forward even more. And so I'd say that was kind of the type of player that I was, but obviously nowhere near as good as either one of them in my wildest dreams.
Well, that's awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Adam. Appreciate your time for being on here, and looking forward to a great season.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I really hope you enjoyed this interview with Adam Parr as much as I did. I found out so many interesting things about his work in LA, and then basically going back into the MLS and kind of starting again and working his way here, and just his interest in the data part and how that can help shape athletes today, especially in soccer. So awesome. If you did not listen to my previous episodes with other members of the performance team, we still have Tyler Knight and John McGregor. Both of them were on the podcast. So you're going to get a full picture of what everybody does there. So go ahead and listen to those from last season, and of course enjoy this and share this with Adam. Wonderful person. As always, thanks for listening to the Charlotte FC podcast. Please do us a favor and share this episode or another episode you like with a friend. Subscribe and follow wherever you can, and of course join us on X, Instagram, Threads at CLTFC Podcast.